answers? I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
I woke up this morning, got myself a gun. Mama always said I'd be the chosen one.
It's hard to imagine that the FBI has more or better information at this point to kind of rush out with the conclusion within like 10 minutes after we all started hearing about this, that it's a targeted act of terror. It may very well be, but most of the time you try to be very careful about attaching that label to an attack until you have solid evidence that indicates a motive that would qualify as terrorism. Like
that is a former FBI Assistant Director, Andrew McCabe. He's talking about the Boulder attack. And saying how quickly it was labeled a terrorist attack. He said most of the time you don't want to rush out and put that on unless you see evidence that might give you a motive right away. This did not happen in the dark of night. It happened in the broad daylight. It was a group of Jewish people marching for those being held still in Gaza by Hamas to be released. And a man throws a firebomb at them and then comes after them with a blowtorch, trying to set more on fire. And you don't connect the dots? Are you that dense? Oh, I came so close to using that word because that just absolutely infuriates me. I never like to jump ahead of a story. I agree with that. And I don't like throwing labels out unless there's clear evidence. But how can you possibly say, oh, this guy just saw some people walking down the street and he had a Molotov cocktail available, he threw it at them, and then tried to put more on fire. Ended up killing one. And they will tell you he was a Colorado resident. They're not mentioning that he was an Egyptian national who had overstayed his visa not once but twice, should have been out of the country by the end of March, and he still was here. And they also don't mention that he had apparently tried to buy a gun. Now, those who are all about gun control, you should take heart in the fact that they denied him that gun based on his illegal status. So then he goes out and gets a Molotov cocktail and attacks this group of Jews marching for peace. And ex-FBI Assistant Director Andrew McCabe is so dense. Well, we wouldn't want to call that a terrorist attack right away. These folks completely get in their own way sometimes when they try to make excuses to the point where they look silly and stupid. Thanks for joining us. Hour number one, Larry Connors USA. And yes, I'm fired up again, as always, for these programs. I can't wait to get on the air each day with you. A lot of material I gather, I never get on the air. A lot of it ends up going into the trash can because the developments change, or I just have to decide, I can only put so much on. At some point, I have to decide the old saying, am I going to cut bait or I'm going to fish? So we're going to go with what we got, and what we've got is great. And reminding you with Larry Connors USA, you do get news, analysis, opinion, and education. You walk away from this hour with more knowledge than you had before you began listening to it. And reminding you, when we're on the air, we are streaming video. You can watch the program. You go to NewsTalkSTL, Rumble, Facebook, Twitter, Larry Connors USA, Rumble, Facebook. And if you miss anything, video or audio, they all go up as a podcast later, once the program is complete, at NewsTalkSTL, LarryConnorsUSA.com, Larry Connors USA Facebook. And if you watch at a later date, do me a favor. I always appreciate you acknowledging that you like the program, but I really appreciate when you push share. Send it on to others, because that tells me really that you're engaged, and you're going to get more engaged. Do want to take a moment to remind you that while many are talking about Pride Month, There are a dozen NFL teams that are not taking time to acknowledge it, and some are calling out, should they be punished? No, they shouldn't. Those that are doing it, so be it. Corporations that have backed away from it. Target has basically turned its back on Pride Month compared to where it was 3 years ago. What we are doing, though, is very honorable. Vic for Vets. We're giving this entire month in honor of our vets. You can send in a name of a vet in your family or friend. They may have died in service. They may have just served. You just send us their name, their rank, whatever you know about their battalion, anything else you want to add, and we will put it on the air on Vic for Vets. How do you send it? Where to? You go to NewsTalkSTL.com, and you'll get all the information. It's going to be going to his producer, an email. NewsTalkSTL, you get all details of how to suggest and nominate one of your favorite vets for special honor and mention. And again, they can be living, and they certainly did not have to die in a war action. But if they served, we're going to honor them if you submit the name. Next hour. All these Biden pardons that got passed through in the last hours, a lot of presidents do that, but the rapidity of these pardons and the fact that the auto pen might have been used that Biden didn't even know, if that's an order from the president, it should be signed by the president himself, not auto pen. Or at least he should know which pardons are being given to whom. The question is, was there cash paid to get some of those pardons? That's a legitimate question, especially considering the history of the Biden crime family. Yeah, I said it. You don't like it? Sue me. Get in line. Later in this hour, I've got an expert coming up talking about Ukraine, but also the Chinese president he's suggesting could be out of office by fall. Chinese Premier Xi could be out. We'll get into that before we wrap up this hour. Now back to the issue of what happened in Boulder, Colorado, and the fact that they just want to step around and just do not want to refer to it as terrorism. And in fact, if you look at some of the coverage that was coming out from the leftist media in the beginning, I'm looking at a report by CNN. I could care less about the reporter, but she wants you to believe, it's a little early to call this a terrorist attack.
Police chief comes out and says, we don't have 2 + 2 = 4 yet. In other words, this is obviously an anti-Semitic attack, and the victims were obviously part of that group. Therefore, we're not calling it terrorism. It adds a lot of it's not good for the community. It's not good for the potentially targeted community. It makes law enforcement look disorganized, and it makes the FBI look so juvenile. Like, why are you getting ahead of the police chief who says, I don't know what this is? It sounds, maybe it is what we all think it is, but maybe it's not. And he has no incentive to get it wrong. So we're going to take a step back. Not be responsive to tweets by 2 heads of the FBI who don't have a long history in local law enforcement, and we will wait and hope it isn't what we all worry it is, and if it is, then there'll be an investigation. But that's like nothing I'd ever seen before.
Yeah, and at the same time, they still will not mention that he is from Egypt, here illegally, twice overstayed on a visa. And they were Jewish victims, and he was throwing a Molotov cocktail, shouting Free Palestine. And you don't make that connection. Idiocy. Jonathan Turley, George Washington law professor on Fox News regarding this attack.
This is a great case to look at to see what's wrong with the system. He overstayed his visa. And then immediately filed, or shortly thereafter filed for asylum. The vast majority of asylum cases are rejected, but it gives you years in the system because it is so overloaded. And this is the same pattern that plays itself out. Now, the vast majority of those people, thank God, are not people like this, are not terrorists, are not horrible human beings planning an attack like this. but the system itself shows this familiar pattern unfolding. Now, as for this guy, he is never going to see another day outside of jail. He is guaranteed life imprisonment. He has already incriminated himself. Even if he had stayed silent, this would be a lead pipe cinch on a terrorism case.
A terrorism case, obviously. By the way, the New York Times issued a report saying that 40% of the illegals in our country, their estimation, 40% are really just those who have overstayed visas. I question that number. I think that's extremely low. The last evaluation apparently was in 1994, and to say that 40% of the illegals in the country are just those, they just overstayed. No, I think they came in under Joe Biden. Senator Ted Cruz says we do need to strengthen these laws.
There's no doubt we need to. Here's the sad reality. Democrats will filibuster any effort to bring sanity to securing our border. I'll tell you, during the entire Biden presidency, the open borders we had, Alejandro Mayorkas was impeached for willfully defying federal law, and every single Senate Democrat voted to dismiss the claim. They didn't even want to hear one whit of evidence. Of all of the victories we've seen in the first 5 months of the Trump presidency, none is more important than the victory securing the border. We have seen, almost from the moment President Trump put his hand on the Bible, we've seen illegal crossings drop over 99%. And I'll tell you, in this big, beautiful bill, we're going to provide funding to build the wall, to hire more agents and ICE agents in detention facilities. But the Democrats continue just to embrace open borders. And apparently what they think America needs is more illegal immigrants, more gang members, more murderers, rapists, and more terrorists like this lunatic in Boulder, Colorado.
And we've got more evidence of that coming up before we wrap up today's program. You know, currently we have a better understanding of the Ukrainian attack over the weekend on those Russian military bases. More than a year in planning, code name, Spiderweb. It was a major success.
Detailed analysis of videos from Ukraine's special forces show a drone closing in on one of President Putin's prized long-range bombers. Minutes later, locals posted images of smoke rising from the base, with drones heard overhead and explosions. Here, a drone is seen taking off from another truck. That attack at Belaya Air Base in Siberia, while simultaneously, thousands of miles away, Olenia Air Base was also struck. From there, this Ukrainian Special Forces drone clearly shows Russian aircraft on fire. Another plane explodes in a ball of flames on camera, and car tires, apparently cheap Russian drone defenses, bounce off. Then the video shows a row of 3 burning Russian Tu-95 aircraft. The Tu-95 is one of Russia's valuable cruise missile-carrying, nuclear-capable aircraft, able to fly as far as the continental United States. Russia has 60 of them in operation, but they are no longer in production, so it would take years and billions of dollars to replace them. Ukraine says it smuggled more than 100 small drones into Russia for the precision strikes that took 18 months of planning.
So they were ready to go. And it happened over the weekend just in advance of the Monday talks in Istanbul, the peace talks scheduled between Istanbul and Russia. Well, of course, the talks didn't happen, did they? No, they didn't. General Jack King was saying, you know, negotiations can play a role, but at some point you got to make it clear.
Maybe Dmitry Medvedev, Russia's senior security official and obviously a very close ally of Vladimir Putin, said it best. He said the Istanbul talks, which just took place yesterday, is not about a compromise for peace. What it's really about is ensuring a swift victory for Russia. And I think that's really where Russia is coming from here. They are stalling in terms of unwillingness to make any concessions because they still see a victory in the front window here. They see an opportunity, and they're continuing to move in that direction. So where are we, and what should the United States do? Listen, we all knew that this was going to be hard. President Trump certainly knew that going into this. Nothing going to be easy. Even if both sides want to end the war, and one side here clearly does not, because they still think they can achieve victory, it would still be hard.
And right before the previous talks to be scheduled between Russia and Ukraine, Russia attacked Ukraine. And then right before these talks, Ukraine attacks Russia. It's a tit for tat. And as General Jack Keane points out, the negotiations need to continue. But everybody knows we're not going to sit around and wait.
We've got to draw a line here. And we've got to take a stand. There's no doubt about that. President Xi, if we cut and run, which is what Putin is after, he wants to wear down the president. President throws up his hands and says, I'm done here.
Yeah.
And cut and run. That's a victory for Putin. That's a victory for Xi. That also strengthens the Ayatollah's spine here in standing up to the United States. You're 100% correct about that. And what else happens as a result of that? Our allies are going to feel threatened as a result of it because our adversaries will be emboldened.
Yeah, I mean, President.
Now is the time to leverage it as part of the peace process. We're still in that peace process, and we've got to use the leverage the United States has.
Of course, unfortunately, this peace process at this time does also include bombing and killing, and it will continue until they reach a solution. And then also you have to deal with what's happening in Gaza. We're getting, again, fake news coverage out of Gaza. Hamas calling the BBC and CNN and saying dozens were killed as they gathered at an aid site to receive food and water and things of this nature. And, of course, the propaganda arm of Hamas sent that word out. And the great media legacy group that will not call a terrorist attack in Boulder a terrorist attack when it clearly was, simply gobbles it up and says, yes, the U.S. helped kill, and Israel helped kill innocent people at an aid site in Gaza. That's been retracted. Even BBC retracted it. And then ended up printing another story saying pretty much the same thing and had to retract that. Lie after lie after lie. It's hard to stay on top of them, isn't it? You talk about whacking them all over and over again. Before this hour is over, consider this. Joe Biden lost in his own clothing closet. This is not a joke. That's coming up. And a former U.S. diplomat with a book focusing on the Ukraine war and a prediction that China Premier Xi could be out of office before September. That's a pretty bold prediction. He's saying really within 60 days. We'll get details from him coming up. Lock and load, ready on the right.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
In all of these years that Wellington Environmental has been my sponsor, I've never mentioned their duct cleaning services. Allergy season is here, and Wellington crews clean air ducts daily in homes and commercial buildings, also cleaning air handling units and diffusers in commercial facilities. Why? Well, because people will see black dirt and mold on the vents, or they are actually suffering from allergies. Don't be fooled by low-cost duct cleaning providers saying they charge only per vent, because once they get on site, the price will skyrocket. Wellington does not do this, never has. Wellington will give you an estimate, and you say Larry Connors, and immediately you get a 20% discount. Call Cindy, 314-644-4930, 314-644-4930. Make your home and business better, safer with Wellington. Be well with Wellington. Ackerman Toyota is #1 in sales for 2024. That is 2 years in a row. It's really no surprise. Ackerman has the largest customer lounge where you can relax, take your time choosing new or premium pre-owned. Ackerman at Hampton and 44. AckermanToyota.com. Thank you for making Ackerman Toyota #1 2 years in a row. AckermanToyota.com. Ackerman Toyota for life. John Beal Roofing reminds you we are in the stormy season And that means if you have even the smallest leak in your roof, you could soon have a much bigger issue. Call the John Bill to make sure that your biggest investment is protected. That call can save you major dollars. If you do get hit during a storm, John Bill has a rapid response team. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF, John Bill. The Oak Street Inn and Lounge has some great news. The Speakeasy will now be open on Sundays, starting at 2. Open to the public. Great for those in the industry who'll want to enjoy a Sunday fun day. Plus, enjoy sushi and cocktails. What more could you want? You want to make sure you get the code. And how do you get the code to the Speakeasy? You go to the Facebook, Oak Street Inn and Lounge Facebook. I'll see you at Oak Street Inn and Lounge in Cottleville.
This is News Talk STL. This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Welcome back. My guest is a former U.S. senior diplomat, Gregory Slayton. First of all, welcome aboard, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. Great to be on your show.
Well, I want to point out to the audience, and I'm going to discuss it in more detail here in a moment. You have a book out, a new one, Portraits of Ukraine, and especially looking at the most recent things this last weekend. I want to get into that in detail, but I cannot ignore the first line is that I see from your people and that you're suggesting, and let me clear it up. Are you effectively stating this is correct, that you believe that Premier Xi will be stripped of power as Trump moves for that crucial trade talks later this week?
Well, let me say this. Yes, I think it is highly possible, highly possible. Of course, China is opaque. I live there, and I've lived in Southeast Asia for much of my adult life. I was raised in part by a Chinese family, and I was a Fulbright scholar over there, did a master's in Asian studies, etc. I have a lot of connections in China, and a number of inexplicable things have happened in the last 2 months that all point to Xi losing power. My sources tell me that within the next 60 days, it will be official. Now, that said, Larry, China is, like Winston Churchill said about the Soviet Union, a mystery wrapped inside a question, surrounded by an enigma.
Right.
So nobody really knows. But that's what I'm hearing. Absolutely.
Well, but that kind of word coming out of China, that's pretty bold predictions by anyone in China to even start whispering that.
Well, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. But there's a number of things. It's not by whispers. It's actually by fact. For example, just a couple things. Xi Jinping's protective detail has been cut by 50% in the last 2 months. Now, what president cuts his own protective detail? Also, okay, you might say, well, whatever, that's not important. Also, these major purges in the PLA, People's Liberation Army, all of those guys were Xi Jinping's guys, every single one. So is he purging his own loyalists in the PLA? Highly doubtful, right? There's a whole bunch of other things I know we've only got a few minutes, but there's a bunch of other stuff.
And one of them I want to get to is the fact that you say his cult of personality is very reminiscent of Mao, that was a one-man rule, and that other CCP rulers are serious, or rather upset, because they no longer have any say.
Well, that's right. That's right. And how is this cult of personality gone? It's gone disastrously. China's economy, they keep making good music, but the point is the unemployment rate is through the roof. They stopped publishing the unemployment rate. That's how bad it is. Companies are going out of business. It's a mess. And then you just go back a few years to the COVID. Xi himself was the architect of that absolute draconian lockdown. People were shouting in Shanghai from the rooftops and from their apartment buildings, I can't get food for my kids.
Right.
Please bring me food. I mean, it was horrible. Dads would go out looking for baby powder and they wouldn't come back.
Do you think Xi would take this closing days to initiate an invasion of Taiwan?
That is the big concern. And that's what American policymakers have to be very concerned about. Honestly, I don't think she has the power to do that anymore because of the purge in the PLA, especially in the very top ranks. The two PLA generals who were responsible for the eastern region of China, that's the region that would lead any attack on Taiwan, were both Xi Jinping acolytes. They're both gone. So I don't think he has the power, but again, you never know.
Well,
so definitely we have to be concerned.
And one other question along this line. There's a devil you know and the devil you don't. Who comes in?
Well, that, of course, nobody really knows. I've heard some names. I'm not going to give any names, but to me, what is I'm very hopeful because Hu Jintao, now you'll remember Hu Jintao because he was the one who was unceremoniously removed from the last party Congress.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, it was
they moved his chair.
China.
They moved his chair literally.
They threw him out. Exactly. I mean, I cannot emphasize how. I mean, obviously, that doesn't even happen in the United States. It's not like a president would have another president physically removed from the room. But in China, where face is everything, that's what they did.
And it was on video. I mean, they didn't try to hide it.
It was everywhere.
Yeah.
Xi Jinping was sending a message. You oppose me, this is what happens to you. Well, Hu Jintao, what I'm hearing is that he is the one who's orchestrating, because Xi Jinping has failed. That's just the long and the short of it. The economy hasn't gone forward. The country's a gigantic mess. $50 trillion. The IMF now estimates that China's public and private debt totals over $50 trillion. That's bigger than the economy of the United States and the European Union. They're never going to pay that back.
So Trump meets with Xi this week. He's meeting with an empty sack.
Well, don't you notice that he's supposed to have had this call with Xi? She's disappeared. She's nowhere to be found for 11 days, right? And Trump is supposed to be talking with Xi, but there's been delays on the China side. No, we're not ready yet. We have to push it back, right? In the last 10 days in Beijing, they've had a number of foreign leaders who have come to Beijing. None of them have met with Xi Jinping, not one. They've all met with the vice chairman, someone else, blah, blah, blah. Where's Xi Jinping?
You are the author of a new book, Portraits of Ukraine, A Nation at War. And, of course, China has been playing a big part in the Ukraine with helping Russia. What would happen on that front?
Well, it's a disaster for Vladimir Putin because Putin and Xi now have very few allies, no allies in the West, none at all. They have North Korea. They have, pariah states. So pariah states. So if China were to change, and the folks who are being talked about as the next leaders of China, they're all much more pro-Western, much more pro-freedom, much more pro-democracy. Some are even pro-freedom of religion, because that's another thing. If you're a Christian or member of virtually any religion in China, there's been a massive crackdown, and freedom of religion, just like a lot of freedoms in China, just doesn't exist.
Well,
the point is,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, your book on Portraits of Ukraine, the Nation at War. I mean, obviously you're tracing when all of the war started, and we're 3 years into this thing. Russia has not won it, and then this last weekend, this surprise attack by Ukraine deep inside Russia, even into northern Siberia.
Operation Spiderweb, tremendous victory for the Ukrainian intelligence. Just amazing. I mean, they've destroyed, probably their initial reports were 40. That's probably not true. But each one of these long-range bombers costs at least $50 million, at least $50 million. And they've destroyed at least 10, maybe 20. You do the maths. Many of those bombers are not being produced anymore.
Correct.
But going back to the book, thank you for mentioning that. I do hope if your readers are interested in the history of Ukraine, the culture of Ukraine, we go through all of that. And then, of course, we get to the war and the invasion, which is now over 3 years old, and the tremendous destruction and just the brutal nature of the war crimes committed all over Ukraine, just horrible. And then the final chapter is why support Ukraine. And I want to mention this: all profits are giving, and we're giving all the profits from the book to really good Ukrainian charities, helping orphans, helping soldiers wounded in the war, etc.
Okay.
So
All right.
you can pick it up on Amazon, Portraits of Ukraine. You can go to the website, portraitsofukraine.org. I hope at least some of your viewers will check it out.
I have no doubt they will. And on that point, a lot of Americans, and I would count myself among them, we'd gotten tired 18 plus months ago saying, why do we keep sending money and supposedly munitions to Ukraine when we're not accounting for it? We don't know where it goes. Is it being used? Is it being stolen? And is it going in the pockets of some oligarchs making themselves rich? Now that we have seen a change of administration here, and we've seen the Ukraine still carrying on the fight, I think more Americans are in favor of stepping up and helping Ukraine, not boots on the ground, but continuing to make sure they have what they need.
Correct. You're absolutely right. Definitely. Accountability has to be strong. The Biden administration, Biden may be the weakest president of our lifetime. Just incredible, right? Couldn't keep track of his own, silverware, let alone what was going to Ukraine. But I have been to Ukraine many, many, many times. And, I've talked to people. Of course, there's corruption in Ukraine. There's corruption in every country, and especially those that were part of the Soviet Union. Because for 70 years, you couldn't feed your family unless you were corrupt. Sadly, that's just the truth of communism, right? But now Ukraine, like Poland, is moving more and more into the Western orbit, understanding the importance of contracts, the importance of, doing the right thing for the right reason. And I'm hopeful about the future of Ukraine. And as you say, they're doing amazing things. I mean, I would say all Western intelligence services said that Ukraine would last for a week, 2 weeks maximum. Here we are 3 years later, and it's the Ukrainians.
And Russia hasn't acquired any more territory than the size of Rhode Island, and that's still waging. Gregory Slayton.
That's exactly right, brother.
Gregory Slayton, author of Portraits of Ukraine, A Nation at War. And as you heard him say, the profits will be going to help those victims that are in need. And we'll be talking again in the near future.
Good. Thanks so much. Great to be with you.
Thank you, Gregory. Appreciate it. Coming up, he talked about how Biden gets lost. The thing, Biden getting lost in his own clothing closet?
You can connect with Larry on Twitter at Larry Connors USA.
I've got a phone number for you and a website where you can take a free, quick survey to learn how to use artificial intelligence, AI, to put your company on a fast track to the future. Here's the number. It's a 636 area code, 636-689-0545. 689-0545. This is PRI Global. And recently, the St. Louis Business Journal named PRI Global as a leading IT consulting company. 25 years working with hundreds of companies, several Fortune 500, locally and around the world. PRI Global has its own AI lab to develop what's best for your company. Take the free survey and be on your way to the future. 636-689-0545. 689-0545. Or go direct PRIGlobal.ai. PRIGlobal.ai. You want the best place to watch baseball or any sport and be able to enjoy premium cigars and whiskeys? Lit Cigar Lounge. Lit has so many events each month. You need to constantly check the Lit Cigar Lounge Facebook. You don't want to miss anything. Plus, you can order food from Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta, delivered within minutes right to your table. By the way, we're in the season for great patio dining. Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta has your table waiting. Since 1995, Renewal by Andersen has helped St. Louis homeowners upgrade with windows and doors. Now it's our 30th anniversary sale. You'll get $1,995 off every project. No gimmicks, real savings, and the nation's best warranty. The offer ends June 30th, so you don't want to wait. There are some restrictions. Visit rbastl.com. Renewal by Andersen. Superior products, exceptional service. Hey, if you're 50 or older, you do not want to take any risk with your money. In fact, you want Leslie Consulting. My friend Bob Leslie can show you a gain and retain plan. It means that you never lose. Plus, you get up to a 20% bonus on day one. Leslie Consulting, a leader in brokerage and risk management. 314-721-0066. LeslieConsulting.com.
This is News Talk STL.
Boom, 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 boom. Gonna shoot you right down. Take you
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Anthony Bernal is really the one aide that Jill Biden trusted so much. And as Jake Tapper has told us in his new book, Jill Biden is one of the most powerful first ladies in history. And that made her chief of staff, her personal factotum, Anthony Bernal, very important. He was one of only two aides who was allowed into the Biden home in Delaware during the campaign, you know, when Joe Biden was hiding in his basement under the cover of the COVID pandemic. Also, in the waning days of Joe Biden's presidency, it was Anthony Bernal was one of only 4 aides allowed into the Rehoboth Beach holiday house where Joe Biden and Jill Biden were making the decision whether or not he would step aside from re-election. So along with probably Hunter Biden, Anthony Bernal also knew Hunter Biden and got on well with him. He was sort of the protector of Biden's secrets.
And there may be a lot of secrets he's protecting. The voice you were listening to, Miranda Devine, the reporter for the New York Post, the one who broke the Hunter Biden laptop story originally. She's referring to Anthony Bernal, longtime aide, as you heard, to the Biden administration. She's suggesting that Bernal, described as, quote, Jill Biden's work husband. I said work husband, but don't get ahead of me. I know where I'm going here. I know. Hang on. Yes, he's 51, 52 years of age. Yes, she's 75, 8. Let me double check. I won't try to give you. She's 74. 30 years more than me. I should have known that. So Anthony Bernal, forget what I said. Just stick with me. Anthony Bernal is 52, 53. But he is the work husband for Jill Biden. And he apparently has played, according to Miranda Devine, a significant role in trying to cover up all the cognitive decline issues that Joe Biden was going through. She said that Jill Biden basically was using Bernal to help her run the White House. Now, there are those that were involved in the White House from time to time, like activist David Hogg. Remember him from the shooting in Florida, who went around trying to make his name on gun control issues, and is one of the 4 DNC members they elected as co-chairs. I don't know if he's still on or not because they decided they couldn't figure out the vote. But bottom line is, Devine was listening to Hogg and others, and they describe him as diminutive, gay, absolutely devoted to the Bidens. Had been with Joe Biden since Joe was vice president. So he's got a long-standing relationship, which, of course, immediately brings up, is there romance involved here? I don't know, but she, according to Miranda Devine, he is described as gay. Doesn't mean he couldn't be bisexual as well. I'm not trying to dwell on that. It's just that this is a guy she's been leaning on. And once they have that kind of confidence, what else are they sharing? Raising the question. Let's go back to Miranda Devine.
He used to pick out her outfits, organise her Vogue covers, and also travelled with her overseas, especially when, towards the end of Joe Biden's presidency, Jill Biden was travelling around on Air Force One solo, and she had Bernal always at her side. I saw him and his sort of obsequious behaviour towards her on a couple of occasions, most particularly during Hunter Biden's trial in Delaware, when he was just glued to her side at every moment, and including flying back to France for 24 hours so she could appear at a public event with Joe Biden.
Yeah, so this relationship goes back 16 years at least, and very close on based on your description. Here is Jill Biden about a month ago on The View.
I was with Joe day and night. I saw him more than any other person. I woke up with him. I went to bed at night with him. So I saw him all throughout the day, and I did not create a cocoon around him. I mean, you saw him in the Oval Office. You saw him making speeches. He wasn't hiding somewhere. I didn't have him, sequestered in some place.
That was Jill Biden, as was pointed out by Fox News. That was how she described Joe Biden. No, I was not hiding him. He was perfectly capable of handling anything. And anything that suggests by Miranda Devine or others that Bernal was helping her hide Joe's deficiencies and inabilities would be fiction. Well, Miranda Devine has her reaction to Jill Biden.
It's laughable what Jill Biden is saying. You just have to contrast Joe Biden's availability to the media compared to Donald Trump's. In the Oval Office, he barely gave any speeches, any press conferences. He even flubbed the Super Bowl interviews, which could not be easier. So that doesn't pass the sniff test. As for Anthony Bernal answering questions, he's been subpoenaed by James Comer, one of 5 aides, to answer questions on exactly this. So he really doesn't have any choice about whether he answers questions. He will be compelled to at least show up.
Show up, could take the 5th. And if he's being questioned, I'm not really interested if there's any romantic history between Jill Biden and him, but I'm interested in the confidants that they had established. How deep did it go? What did he do for her to cover for President Biden, to basically mislead you, the American public? That's my concern. I could care less if she jumped into bed with him or him jumping into bed with her from time to time. But according to Jill, she said, I was with Joe all the time. I put him to bed. I went to bed with him. Quickly added that after saying she put him to bed. There are a lot of questions around this guy. And he could be a key to who was doing what inside the White House. If Jill was directing everything, he's the key to getting that information out, because she's not likely to do it. And then again, can you compel a wife to testify against her husband? That's going to be another issue when it comes up. But now you know the name, and I think you should keep it right in front of you. Anthony Bernal, a longtime aide to Jill Biden, had been with Jill since Joe Biden was vice president. About 20 years difference in age. Obviously, she took him into her confidence long, long ago, and who knows how many secrets they've shared while Joe was vice president, and in between, and then afterwards, and what she knows about the Hunter Biden family laptop money expose and everything else. I want answers. I want answers. I had somebody send me an email today saying all this stuff that was done by Doge and everything they uncovered. I want more. I want people accountable. I want somebody to go to jail. I'm with you. I'm with you on that. And on this case. So if we look back at who is running the White House, we're going to do it in more detail in the next hour. And the question, did Biden or someone get cash for some of these presidential pardons? pay-for-play scheme, bribery. One thing we do know, leftist media like Rachel Madcow continue to believe that our nation will be better off the way Joe Biden wanted to run it, and that would be open the doors with all the millions of illegals to come in. And, of course, then Rachel Madcow pulls on heartstrings when it comes to selecting examples of those who are being rounded up by ICE.
We have limited insight, I think, into the political mindset that's at work, that's driven the Trump administration to do a lot of the things they're doing. I mean, do we know what benefit they see in arresting the drummer from the Milford High School band, right? The honor student, high school junior on the volleyball team, and locking him up? Do we really understand what benefit they think that is to the United States of America? Do we know what benefit Trump sees for the nation in arresting the beloved John's Waffle and Pancake House waitress in Missouri? Right? Do we know what benefit Trump sees in sending full battlefield combat gear, clueless HSI agents with grenades into a neighborhood restaurant in San Diego? Right? Do we know what benefit they think these things are to the country?
We know what Rachel Madcow's agenda is. Paint everything Trump is doing as authoritarian and Hitler-like. Just because they're armed to protect themselves and others. And the cases she presents, oh, how could they go after a drum major or a musician or something like that? If they're here illegally, they are subject to being removed. But Trump has also said about those who are working on farms and in certain businesses, you know, you're not our priority. If you're removed, we'll work on bringing you back if you've committed no crimes. But then she's forgetting about all the Americans who died at the hands of illegals, either directly or indirectly, fentanyl and so forth. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley says there is a story that Joe Biden was so confused while president that he could not even find his way out of his closet. Really? That story when we continue.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
The Napoli heritage of fine dining continues with Napoli Kirkwood. Napoli Kirkwood, now open. So add that to Cafe Napoli in Clayton, Napoli 2 in Town and Country, Napoli 3 in St. Charles, right next door to Napoli C, and don't forget about Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in the district, Chesterfield Valley. All of those locations, plus now, open, Napoli Kirkwood.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
I'll tell you something that I haven't said before because it came from a Secret Service whistleblower this past year. I talked to so many of them after the attempted assassinations of President Trump, but this Secret Service whistleblower actually was assigned to Biden, and he told me that Biden used to get lost in his closet in the mornings in the White House. I mean, the guy literally stumbling around in the White House residence couldn't find his way out of his own closet. The President of the United States.
Now, again, that's information Missouri Senator Hawley got from a whistleblower. I don't know of any documentation or evidence that backs up what he told Hawley, but it sounds possible, doesn't it? Considering what we've seen with Biden in his closing days. This, as we had pointed out earlier, for many is considered Pride Month. And we have not been celebrating Pride Month here. If you're an adult and that's your choice of life and style, I have no issue with that. It's when you shove it onto kids and you insist on the flag being thrown in their faces and you dress up mannequins in various clothing to make it appear like they could hide their genitals if they want to. Well, that's also changed. A lot of corporations have backed down this year. I'd mentioned earlier, at least 12, unless it's changed, at least a dozen NFL teams this year are doing nothing about Pride Month. They're not putting any display up in the game, during the game, at any point, course, they're not really playing right now, so that gives them a way to get around it. But many of the other NFL teams are putting it up on their logos, showing that, yes, even though we're not in play at this point, we support Pride Month. What we're doing here at News Talk STL is supporting our vets. Vicks for Vets. And what you do is you contact News Talk STL, go to our webpage, and you'll find out how you can send us the name of someone that has served, may be serving now, that you want to be praised as one of our veterans. And then Vic, on his program, Vic Perselli, will share that. But I'm looking at a recent survey by Gravity Research that polled more than 200 corporate executives. It shows that 39% of those companies are scaling back on Pride Month. 39%. That includes sponsorship of Pride events, posting supportive messages, selling Pride-themed merchandise. In other words, they're just trying to walk away from it. The president of this research group said the Trump administration is driving the change. Companies are under increasing pressure not to engage and speak out on issues. That's not because of Trump. It's because of Americans have decided we're fed up with it. You want to be a corporation, speak out, go ahead. See how it pays off for you at the box office or at your sales counter. That's your decision. No one is stopping them from doing anything they want. They're changing because they know they're in a losing cause at this point. Coming up, more on the war in Ukraine and something else Ukraine just pulled off against Russia. Remember our pledge, one nation under God.
You can hear podcasts of this program at Larry Connors USA Facebook. Larry Connors USA Facebook.
John Beal Roofing reminds you we are in the stormy season, and that means if you have even the smallest leak in your roof, you could soon have a much bigger issue. Call the John Bill to make sure that your biggest investment is protected. That call can save you major dollars. If you do get hit during a storm, John Bill has a rapid response team. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF, John Bill. Great patio season to enjoy any of the Cafe Napoli locations. How about the Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in Chesterfield? Enjoying coal-fired pizza, nothing else like it. Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in Chesterfield. A few doors down, Lit Cigar Lounge, where you can enjoy premium cigars and whiskeys. Check the Lit Cigar Lounge Facebook for details, plus gift cards for friends. I'll see you at Lit Cigar Lounge in Chesterfield. Ackerman Toyota is #1 in sales for 2024. That is 2 years in a row. It's really no surprise. Ackerman has the largest customer lounge where you can relax, take your time choosing new or premium pre-owned. Ackerman at Hampton and 44. AckermanToyota.com. Thank you for making Ackerman Toyota #1 2 years in a row. AckermanToyota.com. Ackerman Toyota for life. It's that time of season when families, businesses are moving. For local or long distance, I endorse McGuire Moving. Get a date set soon before the schedules are booked. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. McGuire is constantly giving back to our veterans, such as Support Dogs for Our Brave. So with McGuire, you're getting excellent service and helping our vets. McGuireMoving.com. So many times, Vincent's Jewelers has helped me surprise someone special. Vincent's locally owned can do the same for you, and you don't have to break the bank to get something really nice, maybe even customized. The smile you're going to get back from that special someone, priceless. Check VincentsJewelers.com every day because new items are arriving and there are special deals. Vincent's, my only jeweler. VincentsJewelers.com. VincentsJewelers.com. I can tell you how to get a free quick quiz to see how artificial intelligence can boost your company's potential. You go to priglobal.ai, priglobal.ai. St. Louis Business Magazine listing PRI as one of the leading IT companies, and PRI has its own AI lab to develop what your business needs. priglobal.ai, priglobal.ai.
This is News Talk STL.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Got myself a gun. Mama always said I'd be the chosen one.
I think you're going to see a lot of this. That rush you're hearing in Washington now is the senior staff members of Joe Biden's administration lawyering up, because they're going to have to show, somebody's going to show the paper trail from where some of these pardons and other things that went on the last few months, the thousands of pardons that were given. There's no way in the world Joe Biden knew who they were, Liz, and you know good and well that there had to be a transaction. In Tennessee, years ago, we had a governor before Lamar Alexander. It was called Clemency for Cash, and they were literally selling pardons, and they had to swear Lamar Alexander in early. Now, fast forward to today's time, where the paper trail with the computers and everything else, I believe there will be one, but I suspect in the end, everyone will throw it on Joe Biden's lap.
Yep, no doubt it's going to fall on Joe Biden's lap, and that is the question about cash for pardons. That was Tennessee Congressman Tim Burchett saying there's a real question going on, and we need to know. First of all, did Joe Biden even sign these pardons, all these pardons he granted? Was the auto pen used? Was it used with his authority and knowledge? Did he know and understand all the cases were being given pardons? And then the other issue is, did some of these pardons get a grant to be pardoned after they paid cash or money in some form or another? Cash, you don't have any checks. A lot easier to hide. And again, this is questioning. And the left will get incensed because you dare question that. Did they not question Trump when he issued pardons? Of course they did. Did they find anything? No. Much like, quote, so-called Russian collusion. They weren't questioning then. They were accusing. And there's a big difference. Now, you can say my question amounts to an accusation. So be it. But I'm not directly accusing Joe Biden or someone in the White House for getting cash or someone that did pay money so they could get a pardon. But I am asking, and I think it deserves a full inquiry, congressional and beyond. Thanks for joining us. Hour number 2, Larry Connors, USA. We're here every Monday through Friday for you from 6 to 8 p.m. And when we're on the air, reminding you again, we are streaming video. You can watch the program. I know more and more of you are doing it. You seem to really enjoy it, and I'm glad you do. It's engaging. It's not just like watching paint dry on the wall. I mean, I try not to be paint drying on a wall. I might be splotchy paint, and I will often be outside the lines. I often color outside the lines. But glad to have you watching. How do you watch? Well, you go to NewsTalkSTL Rumble, Facebook, or Twitter. Larry Connors, USA, Rumble, or Facebook. And everything goes up as a podcast when we complete it. At NewsTalkSTL, LarryConnorsUSA.com, Larry Connors USA Facebook. And reminding you that if you missed the previous hour, I strongly encourage you to pull that hour up. We had a former senior diplomat on. He has a new book out, Portrait of Ukraine, But our discussion also centered not just on Ukraine, but what's happening in China. And his statement is that basically sources tell him from inside China, sources he believes, that Xi is on the way out. He could be out of office within 60 days, and that he will have no authority whenever Trump and he meet to have any trade discussions. I strongly encourage you to pull up that program and listen to it in detail. Now, the other issue we have going on, obviously, is a roundup of illegals in our nation. And Trump has made it clear. We're not going after those who have their head down, they're just doing a job, and they're not trying to cause chaos, mayhem, crime. But if they're here illegally, they could be caught up in a sweep. They might be taken out of the country. If they think they might be caught, the best thing for them to do is self-deport. If they self-deport, then they can apply to come back in legally. How soon they'd get in, not sure. But they could do that. Otherwise, they might be grabbed up in a sweep, not intending for them, but they happen to be at a nightclub party where various gang members are known to be illegals, and ICE and federal agents raid it. You're there, you're going to be grabbed up. But the crimes some of these folks have done, the left will have you believe that they're all just harmless people. They're not doing anything wrong. Listen, the documentation is so clear and loud. Not only are they doing something wrong, but they have, and they more than likely will. An example right out of Boston.
The brave men and women of ICE, CBP, ATF, DEA, Diplomatic Security Service, and the U.S. Marshals have to go out and pick up some of the most horrible criminals that are roaming free in Massachusetts. These are just some of them. A child sex offender that was previously deported that was released by a local agency but was back living across the street from a playground. A sex trafficker that was arrested for raping a child that was re-released back into the community. A habitual drunk driver who, in the midst of his drunk driving, kidnapped a child. Theft from, we had one person that was previously deported that was stealing from disabled senior citizens. Not only that, but they got several convicted murderers, rapists, spouse abusers, child abusers, and drug traffickers. You can see their mugshots, which are all up here on the photo, and I really want everyone to see that. Because not only did they enter our country illegally, but they were released back into our community by elected officials and sanctuary jurisdictions that did not want to turn these individuals over to ICE. I really want everyone to see their faces and know what's going on.
Because, unfortunately, the leftists will continue to say, oh, they're basically choir boys. You're rounding up kids in a choir or a marching band. You think I'm stretching the point? Rachel Madcow.
We have limited insight, I think, into the political mindset that's at work, that's driven the Trump administration to do a lot of the things they're doing. I mean, do we know what benefit they see in arresting the drummer from the Milford High School band, right? The honor student, high school junior on the volleyball team, and locking him up? Do we really understand what benefit they think that is to the United States of America? Do we know what benefit Trump sees for the nation in arresting the beloved John's Waffle and Pancake House waitress in Missouri? Right? Do we know what benefit Trump sees in sending full battlefield combat gear, clueless HSI agents with grenades into a neighborhood restaurant in San Diego? Right? Do we know what benefit they think these things are to the country?
And do you know why she throws in, they're going in with guns and they got grenades? She's suggesting that's what they're going to use on these illegals. And what benefit? Benefit protecting our nation and American citizens. Unless they want to go peacefully. And for those who want to get in the way. And Tom Homan's made it very clear. You can be sanctuary city, whatever you want to be. But you get between me and my agents, you cross the line.
You can support sanctuary cities if that's what you desire to do. Sanctuary cities can stand aside and watch ICE keep their communities safe. Because any public official, whether you're mayor, city councilman, or governor, their number one responsibility is protection of the communities. And ICE has been clear, we're targeting public safety threats and national security threats. I can't believe there's any elected official, and especially a judge, that doesn't believe we should be doing that, and they should be helping us. But ICE have from day one. You can sit aside and watch, you can argue against us all you want and protest all you want, but when you cross that line, I've said this 1,000 times, when you cross that line to impediment or knowingly harboring, concealing an illegal alien from ICE, you will be prosecuted.
Good. And that means that judge that decided to help an illegal escape her courtroom and the courthouse out the back door, even while she was wearing her judicial robes, claiming that is my judicial responsibility, she is charged. She should lose her law license in addition to her office, and she should be put behind bars with some of these same illegals. Because, again, I will repeat, those who believe these illegals have a right to be here, then you go down and you sign on your personal name and recognizance that they can live at your home. You'll be responsible for their actions. Anybody? Going once? Twice? Apparently no one wants to do that. They're glad to let them live in your backyard. This surprise Ukraine attack that hit over the weekend, hitting military bases deep inside Russia. It's still being evaluated as to how great it was. Retired four-star General Jack King says it is clear that if diplomacy is not going to work, Ukraine is not going to yield.
Just that diplomatic talking is not working. So the leverage has got to be, I think, number one, military assistance, and give them the robust air defense systems and the other things they desperately need. Why is that? Because once Putin sees that the United States is still committed to Ukraine, he knows he can't achieve victory. The evidence is already right in front of us. We're 39 months into the war, Maria. 39 long months. That's how much time it took for us to defeat Nazi Germany. And Putin has not succeeded. He hasn't even taken the entire Donbass region, which is what he wanted to take in 2014. So he cannot succeed if the United States is providing military assistance. He knows that for a fact. Second thing, let's issue the crippling sanctions. That is all part of the process. Let's leverage Putin just as we did Zelensky. We don't know, let's be frank, if it's going to work, but it certainly is worth a try at this point because diplomatic talks are not getting us there.
No, they're not. The other day, they were supposed to have talks in Istanbul, Monday, and the day before is when Ukraine carried out the attacks into Russia, deep into Russia. And the last time they were scheduled to have talks, Russia fired upon Ukraine. Russia has apparently fired back into Ukraine since this last weekend, but they were hitting homes, territory, neighborhoods, not military targets. But what Ukraine carried out is an amazing feat of intel and success, code name, Spiderweb.
Detailed analysis of videos from Ukraine's special forces show a drone closing in on one of President Putin's prized long-range bombers. Minutes later, locals posted images of smoke rising from the base, with drones heard overhead and explosions. Here, a drone is seen taking off from another truck. That attack at Belaya Air Base in Siberia, while simultaneously, thousands of miles away, Olenia Air Base was also struck. From there, this Ukrainian Special Forces drone clearly shows Russian aircraft on fire. Another plane explodes in a ball of flames on camera, and car tires, apparently cheap Russian drone defenses, bounce off. Then the video shows a row of 3 burning Russian Tu-95 aircraft. The Tu-95 is one of Russia's valuable cruise missile-carrying, nuclear-capable aircraft, able to fly as far as the continental United States. Russia has 60 of them in operation, but they are no longer in production, so it would take years and billions of dollars to replace them. Ukraine says it smuggled more than 100 small drones into Russia for the precision strikes that took 18 months of planning.
And the way they did it, apparently, they were inside the roofs of tractor-trailer rigs. They were inside the vehicle itself, but it looked like just the roof. And you go inside, you see that it's loaded with cargo. And they drove those trucks deep into Russia to get the drones closer to the targets. And when they were in position, and obviously at an appointed time and date, which happened the other day, they had the tops of the container cargo trucks open up and missiles, drones fired out. And just today, Ukraine hit Russia again. We had a situation with, during the first war, the Crimean War, as Russia went in and took over Crimea, they established a land bridge connection to make sure they could get their troops and food and military in and out of Crimea. Just today, Ukraine experts using underwater demolition blew up that bridge. That's another victory for Ukraine. General Jack King says, while all this is underway, we need to keep in mind we can continue to push for negotiations, but we do not let up the pressure.
We've got to draw a line here, and we've got to take a stand. There's no doubt about that. President Xi, if we cut and run, which is what Putin is after, he wants to wear down the president. President throws up his hands and says, I'm done here.
Yeah.
And cut and run. That's a victory for Putin. That's a victory for Xi. That also strengthens the Ayatollah's spine here in standing up to the United States. You're 100% correct about that. And what else happens as a result of that? Our allies are going to feel threatened as a result of it because our adversaries will be emboldened.
Yeah, I mean,
now is the time to leverage it as part of the peace process. We're still in that peace process, and we've got to use the leverage the United States has.
And leverage is just trying to get them to come to the table. And, of course, with the attacks being carried out by Ukraine the day before the latest talks were to start, you knew that was going to blow up in this, literally, and not happen. But it's reassuring to see that Ukraine is telling Russia, when we meet at the table, you consider us equal, maybe greater. While we have complained, and I've been among them, complaining about all the money and munitions going into Ukraine, that was during the Biden years because we were not sure what was going where and who was getting all of it. I'm convinced under the Trump administration there's greater accountability. And I am for supporting Ukraine. We cannot let Russia roll over them. But no U.S. troops on the ground. Coming up, who has been running the White House in Biden's closing days, months, years? A question that might involve a romance story? Lock and load. Ready on the right.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
I want to tell you more about Wellington Environmental's dustless blasting services. Wellington can blast paint, grease, graffiti, even stripes off parking lots. Truly amazing and powerful. But can Wellington blast something more sensitive? Yes, Wellington can use dry ice to blast soot and odors off smoke-damaged surfaces right after a fire. Currently, Wellington uses dry ice to clean mold off wood inside a home. Why? Well, dry ice immediately disappears, turns into a vapor. That means no mess to clean up, no damaged surfaces. You need to check with Wellington, always researching and practicing with new, better, faster, safer equipment and products for you. And it's very easy to schedule an estimator for your next project. Call Cindy, 314-644-4930, 644-4930. Be well with Wellington. McGuire Moving is silver certified, which means they are great at relocating senior citizens. In fact, McGuire is a household name because McGuire understands the stress involved when moving older adults. So if you or family members need help moving, I highly recommend McGuire Moving. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. Get a free in-home estimate. McGuireMoving.com. I've got a great evening planned for you. We start with dining at the Oak Street Inn Lounge in Cottleville. We enjoy sunset on the rooftop, then down to the speakeasy. Just one visit, you're going to see why I'm always talking about the Oak Street Inn and Lounge. Plus, you might want to plan a staycation, a romantic getaway. Check out OakStreetInnandLounge.com for various events this summer. Oak Street Inn and Lounge, Cottleville. Oak Street Inn and Lounge, Cottleville.
This is News Talk STL.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Anthony Bernal is really the one aide that Jill Biden trusted so much. And as Jake Tapper has told us in his new book, Jill Biden is one of the most powerful first ladies in history. And that made her chief of staff, her personal factotum, Anthony Bernal, very important. He was one of only 2 aides who was allowed into the Biden home in Delaware during the campaign, you know, when Joe Biden was hiding in his basement under the cover of the COVID pandemic. Also, in the waning days of Joe Biden's presidency, it was Anthony Bernal was one of only 4 aides allowed into the Rehoboth Beach holiday house where Joe Biden and Jill Biden were making the decision whether or not he would step aside from re-election. So along with probably Hunter Biden, Anthony Bernal also knew Hunter Biden and got on well with him. He was sort of the protector of Biden's secrets.
The protector of Biden's secrets, Anthony Bernal. He had been with Joe Biden since the days that Joe was vice president. He was her chief confidant and possibly more. Now, when I say that, I'm not trying to start a soap opera. But I will point out a couple of facts here. Jill Biden is now 76. Let me double check it again. 74. Bernal is 52. Larry, what are you saying? I'm just pointing out facts. You're the one who's making that connection. I'm just pointing that out. But that he was always beside her to an extent you're going to hear in a moment that, wow, the guy had a lot of access to not only the Biden household, but to Jill Biden at different times of the day. I'm looking at a piece from Sky News Australia, which immediately says Anthony Bernal's role in the Biden White House raises eyebrows. And they're not talking about just what he was doing to help cover up Joe Biden's decline. And then there's a piece that was written as an explosive piece that was written part of an undercover video by Project Veritas. It featured David Hogg, vice chair of the Democrat National Committee, making very candid remarks about the power dynamics behind Joe Biden's 2024 campaign. In the footage, David Hogg suggests Anthony Bernal, the first chief of staff to the First Lady, wielded significant, largely hidden influence. In fact, speaking to an undercover journalist, Hogg said, the DNC, quote, is always going to be a campaign arm of the president. But the real story was about those closest to Biden. And the bigger issue was the inner circle around Biden, and that Anthony Bernal was one of those, quote, who had an enormous amount of power. There's another ex-Biden staffer on that same video calling Anthony Bernal a, quote, shadowy Wizard of Oz type figure. According to this ex-Biden staffer, Deterian Jones, as he's quoted, and is on the video, he said Bernal's influence in the White House was an open secret. And his quote is this, referring to Bernal, he was scary. The general public wouldn't know what he looked like, but he wielded incredible power. And he had complete access to Jill Biden at any point. He worked in the Clinton and Obama administrations before playing a major role in Biden's reelection campaign as deputy campaign manager. Now, he had been in July 2024 subpoenaed by the House Oversight Committee as part of an inquiry into Biden's health. Days later, he was one of 4 senior aides present during a crucial meeting at the president's Rehoboth Beach residence, a meeting where, at that point, Biden decided to withdraw from the 2024 race. Did he have a role in it? Was he there to help Jill Biden push Joe out, or was he fighting with her to keep him? There are a lot of questions. Don't have the answers. But Miranda Devine of the New York Post, who broke the story about the Hunter Biden laptop, and everybody was mocking her until it finally became proven, yeah, it existed. And even the New York Times, a year and a half later, the New York Times had to admit the story in the New York Post about the Hunter Biden laptop was true. So again, Miranda Devine on what Anthony Bernal has been doing.
He used to pick out her outfits, organise her Vogue covers, and also travelled with her overseas, especially when, towards the end of Joe Biden's presidency, Jill Biden was travelling around on Air Force One solo, and she had Bernal always at her side. I saw him and his sort of obsequious behaviour towards her on a couple of occasions, most particularly during Hunter Biden's trial in Delaware, when he was just glued to her side at every moment, and including flying back to France for 24 hours so she could appear at a public event with Joe Biden.
Yeah, so this relationship goes back 16 years at least, and very close based on your description. Here is Jill Biden about a month ago on The View.
I was with Joe day and night. I saw him more than any other person. I woke up with him. I went to bed at night with him. So I saw him all throughout the day, and I did not create a cocoon around him. I mean, you saw him in the Oval Office. You saw him making speeches. He wasn't hiding somewhere. I didn't have him, sequestered in some place.
Yeah, but when he was out in public, it was pretty much a disaster. Now, Jill Biden says, I was with him all the time. I went to bed with him, got up in the morning with him. But Miranda Devine, talking about Anthony Bernal, using the word obsequious as to how he hung around Jill, that basically says he's always submissive, eager to please. Whatever you want, I'm your servant. I will carry it out. Was there any relationship between them beyond, quote, the professional relationship? I really don't care, except if there's information in there that would tell us just how bad Jill knew Biden was, despite what she said on The View, and how the American people got lied to. Miranda Devine had her reaction to how Jill Biden described things.
It's laughable what Jill Biden is saying. You just have to contrast Joe Biden's availability to the media compared to Donald Trump's. In the Oval Office, he barely gave any speeches, any press conferences. He even flubbed the Super Bowl interviews, which could not be easier. So that doesn't pass the sniff test. As for Anthony Bernal answering questions, he's been subpoenaed by James Comer, one of 5 aides, to answer questions on exactly this. So he really doesn't have any choice about whether he answers questions. He will be compelled to at least show up.
Yeah, he will show up. He could take the fifth, but he will have to show up. And they could issue a subpoena against Joe Biden. And she would have to show up. And Joe Biden. After all, no one is above the law. Have we not heard that repeatedly from the left? No one is above the law. If we subpoena you, you must show up. As Hunter Biden did reluctantly and not on the date he was requested to be there, he made a point to hold a news conference outside the Capitol on the far side of the Congressional Committee, the House side. He went to the Senate side. And then we have another story that's been circulating about Josh Hawley and Byron Donald share this story.
Biden used to get lost in his closet in the mornings in the White House. I mean, the guy literally stumbling around in the White House residence couldn't find his way out of his own closet. The president of the United States. I mean, this is outrageous. We were lied to.
Meanwhile, Bill Clinton says Biden seemed fine.
Listen, Bill Clinton's lying. Let's just be honest. He's lying, frankly, again. Joe Biden was not capable of doing the job. We all know this. The man, it's not just his mental capabilities, in my view, is also his physical capabilities. He wasn't able to hold long, extended meetings with members of Congress, and that's Democrat members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, Republican leadership. He wasn't able to do it. They would send him out there every now and again to do a speech or to speak to the press, and if the press started asking too many questions, his staff would come in and break it up. I've heard the stories that when he was meeting with the four corners, that's the speaker, the Senate majority leader, and the minority leader in both chambers, if he got off script, got off his note card that the staff gave him, they would get him back on script or get him out of the room and end the meeting. This is what was going on. They lied to the American people. They covered up the fact that Joe Biden was not capable of doing the job, and that's why the Oversight Committee is going to investigate.
Yes,
Good.
it is.
Good. Investigate it. And Hawley, that whistleblower that said Biden couldn't even find his way out of his closet, I want to hear from that guy as well. Rand Paul and Donald Trump against each other on the big, beautiful bill, and more when we continue.
You can connect with Larry on Twitter at Larry Connors USA.
Question: are you looking to unlock the full potential of artificial intelligence for your business? I want you to meet my friends at PRI Global, named by the St. Louis Business Journal as a leading IT consulting firm. 25 years helping local and worldwide companies. PRI Global has a free survey to determine where your company stands in your AI journey. You simply go to priglobal.ai. priglobal.ai. And I also have a phone number, so get ready to copy that number. And I'll remind you that PRI Global has its own AI lab, creating, adapting, developing, pushing the boundaries for what AI can do for you. Here's the number, 636-689-0545. 636-689-0545. Or visit priglobal.ai. priglobal.ai. Here's great news. Napoli Kirkwood is now open. So that means fine dining right in the heart of Kirkwood. So you have the original Cafe Napoli in downtown Clayton, Napoli 2, Town and Country, Napoli 3 on the streets of St. Charles, right next door to Napoli C, plus Napoli Brothers Pasta and Pizza in the Chesterfield Valley. All of those locations, and now adding Napoli Kirkwood. What a great place to dine. Napoli Kirkwood, now open. Since 1995, Renewal by Andersen has helped St. Louis homeowners upgrade with windows and doors. Now it's our 30th anniversary sale. You'll get $1,995 off every project. No gimmicks, real savings, and the nation's best warranty. The offer ends June 30th, so you don't want to wait. There are some restrictions. Visit rbastl.com. Renewal by Andersen. Superior products, exceptional service. You've worked hard for your money, so protect it. Meet my friend Bob Leslie and ask about the Gain and Retain Plan. Leslie Consulting, 40 years in the St. Louis area as a leader in brokerage and risk management. Call 314-721-0066, 721-0066. Oh, and ask Bob how he was the L.A. Dodger #1 pick. LeslieConsulting.com.
This is News Talk STL.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
The bottom line is this. Republicans' one ugly bill is a farce. It's betraying our values. It's a threat to working families, and it's a giveaway to the very few at the expense of the many. Senate Democrats will fight this bill in committee, on the floor, and in the court of public opinion every step, every day, and every possible way.
The words of Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. I love saying minority leader because they no longer control the Senate. But what could they do to destroy the big, beautiful bill that Trump has in place and pushing forward? They came out of the House, now it's in the hands of the Senate. Whereas, depending upon the source you're reading, it's running into Senate fiscal hawks, Republicans, one being Rand Paul. And there is a fight already brewing, aside from dealing with the Senate Democrats, dealing with GOP members of the Senate. So here's where we stand on this thing. First of all, President Trump is already ripping Senator Rand Paul, saying he cannot get behind the 2-year raise and the debt ceiling of this one big, beautiful bill, though he likes other aspects. That's Rand Paul saying, I like a lot of it, but I can't get behind it. And Trump on social media said, Rand Paul has very little understanding of the big, beautiful bill, especially the tremendous growth that is coming. He loves voting no on everything. He thinks it's good politics, but it's not. The big, beautiful bill is a big winner. Rand votes no on everything, but never has any practical or constructive ideas. His ideas are actually crazy, losers. The people of Kentucky can't stand him. This is a big growth bill. All of that from President Trump. Yeah, he's fired up over the fact that Rand Paul is pushing back. Rand Paul had stated on Barney and Company just today, we know most Republicans, not me, voted to continue the Biden spending levels in March. So we're going to go through September of this year, and the deficit for this year is going to be over $2 trillion. If you're borrowing $5 trillion, that makes me think that you're going to add another $2 trillion, maybe $2.8 trillion next year. So it doesn't show me that you've turned anything around. Now, he's not the only one with that thought process. I think all of us want to see we need to cut the budget deficit. Elon Musk, on his last day in serving as part of the Doge project, did voice concern that everything he worked to get cut, the money saved would be put back in under different programs. Granted, he exposed a lot of abuse, corruption, and scams, but so far no one's been charged with any crimes, which I'm still waiting for it to happen. But Rand Paul said, I think there are 4 people who are skittish about the spending levels. Some of them are skittish about $5 trillion. I think I'm the most vocal on all fronts, but more are starting to come to this realization. This would mean that the big, beautiful bill as it left the House went to the Senate. While some changes are expected, there could be some major changes. The Office of Management and Budget, Voight, is pointing out there's still the thing to do for America.
This bill doesn't increase the deficit or hurt the debt. In fact, it lowers it by $1.4 trillion. What some of the watchdogs have done is they have used CBO's artificial baseline, which doesn't allow and assume that current tax law will be extended because of sunsets that are in the law. And it's really a reconciliation bill. It's not really a budget bill. It is using a budget process. This is a $1.4 trillion over 10 years deficit reduction. It's $1.6 trillion in mandatory savings. Obviously, we have a little bit of spending in there as well for border and defense. But that is the biggest mandatory savings package that we have seen since the 1997. It's very historic.
It is historic if it goes down that way. That's Russ Vought, the Office of Bureau Management, on this budget. Now, his words are in conflict with what I read for you from Rand Paul. I don't know who's got the right answer here. There are a lot of financial experts on both sides. I do know this, that it is clear that if we do not have an extension of the tax cuts that Trump had put in place his first 4 years, then you will be paying more money. A lot of this now falling upon Senate Majority Leader John Thune to make a run around the parliamentarian rules to get these tax cuts permanent. They say if he does that, it would seriously undermine the filibuster and open the door for Democrats to rewrite Senate rules of the future. The elections have consequences. Senate Republicans argue that it is up to the Senate Budget Chair, Lindsey Graham, Republican, South Carolina, to set the budgetary baseline for the bill. They say it's not up to the parliamentarian to determine whether extending the 2017 Trump tax cuts should be scored as adding to the deficit. That's one line, says a lot about where the battleground is. If you want to say that by extending the tax cuts does not add to the deficit, that's different than say by extending the tax cuts, we do add to the deficit. And there's where the fight started. And it won't be resolved quickly. The key is, when it is resolved, what's going to happen for the American people. Some are estimating that under this 10-year budget bill, you're looking at a massive increase down the road on our deficit. On one hand, they talk about how it outlays more than $1.5 trillion against current baseline spending. But if they're not using the right figures to begin with, as you were hearing suggested by Russell Vought, then who's got the right numbers? You're going to recognize who has the right numbers when suddenly you get a tax bill that you didn't have previously. In the meantime, in the state of New York, unfortunately, when it comes to replacing some blue city governors or blue city mayors and blue state governors, there are a lot of good Republicans that can do their job, but then you have to worry about, well, who's going to replace those if they're members of Congress already? Elise Stefanik is stepping up saying she's going to run for New York governor.
I dubbed Kathy Hochul the worst governor in America because it's true. It's not just Republicans, but it's independents and Democrat voters as well across this state who understand that she has failed. She has delivered catastrophic failed policies in New York. This is her hand-picked lieutenant governor that she chose. That is now primarying Kathy Hochul. And it's because she's failed at her job. It is because we have an economic crisis, a crime crisis, you name it, a corruption crisis in New York State. I am considering running as the Republican candidate to fix decades of decay by single-party Democrat rule.
So we'll see. I said she was running. I should have said she's considering running. I don't want to lose her in Congress, but it would be better for the state of New York, especially if they get more like her. Be better for the citizens of New York. Question for you. I think the question is simple, and it's simply answered. You might disagree. Question. When is a terrorist attack not a terrorist attack? Well, that's when legacy media and the leftists deny.
Police chief comes out and says, we don't have 2 + 2 = 4 yet. In other words, this is obviously an anti-Semitic attack, and the victims were obviously part of that group. Therefore, we're not calling it terrorism. It adds a lot of it's not good for the community. It's not good for the potentially targeted community. It makes law enforcement look disorganized, and it makes the FBI look so juvenile. Like, why are you getting ahead of the police chief who says, I don't know what this is? It sounds, maybe it is what we all think it is, but maybe it's not. And he has no incentive to get it wrong. So we're going to take a step back, not be responsive to tweets by 2 heads of the FBI who don't have a long history in local law enforcement, and we will wait and hope it isn't what we all worry it is. And if it is, then there'll be an investigation. But that's like nothing I'd ever seen before.
That was CNN talking about the Boulder attack. The police chief in Boulder did say shortly after, he said, I'm really not sure what it is at this point. And they took that and they magnified it because immediately Bongino, secretary to Patel with the FBI, assistant, I should say, they both immediately said that's obviously a terrorist attack. A man waving a Molotov cocktail, throwing it into a crowd of Jews marching for peace and shouting, Free Palestine. You think there's not some terrorist attack underway? Now, if you're in official capacity, you might say, I want to get all the facts, but you have to acknowledge, yes, it was a terrorist attack. But you can go back after that event happened, and she made a point to say, the police chief in Boulder, Colorado has no political sway in this. He has no reason to be political about it. Neither does Patel nor Bongino. They're about law and order. The politics in the FBI have been swept out best we can. But an example of one who was there, who even now still continues to play politics instead of law and order, is ex-FBI Assistant Director Andrew McCabe and his evaluation.
It's hard to imagine that the FBI has more or better information at this point to kind of rush out with the conclusion within like 10 minutes after we all started hearing about this, that it's a targeted act of terror. It may very well be, but most of the time you try to be very careful about attaching that label to an attack until you have solid evidence that indicates a motive that would qualify as terrorism.
A motive that would qualify as terrorism? Riddle me this. A guy carrying a Molotov cocktail and a homemade fire weapon throws a Molotov cocktail into the people. It blows up, burning several, one dead, and he's standing by with his homemade fire gun, and he's going to light up more people with his blowtorch, and you're looking for a motive? I don't even need to tell you that he was yelling, Free Palestine. And they were obviously Jews participating in a simple march. But the left just stumbles over themselves trying to say, whoa, we don't want to rush to judgment. They have not a damn problem with rushing to judgment when it fits their narrative. George Washington law professor, Fox News analyst, Jonathan Turley.
This is a great case to look at to see what's wrong with the system. He overstayed his visa and then immediately filed, or shortly thereafter filed, for asylum. The vast majority of asylum cases are rejected, but it gives you years in the system because it is so overloaded. And this is the same pattern that plays itself out. Now, the vast majority of those people, thank God, are not people like this, are not terrorists, are not horrible human beings planning an attack like this. But the system itself shows this familiar pattern unfolding. Now, as for this guy, he is never going to see another day outside of jail. He is guaranteed life imprisonment. He has already incriminated himself. Even if he had stayed silent, this would be a lead pipe cinch on a terrorism case.
And because there's video. And that's why you will not hear me call him a suspect. That's standard procedure in news journalism. When you refer to someone that's been arrested, maybe charged or not yet charged, but as a suspect, or sometimes a person of interest. But when they're on video and it's all clear that they're the one who threw it, they're no longer a suspect. Now, they may make some kind of allegations and denials to why, but they did it. It amazes me, and I've spent decades in the news business, listening and watching local news anchors currently take a story like this and say, police suspect it was arson. It was definitely a case of arson. Police suspect he did it. He did do it. And then they will say police are looking for additional suspects. They may well be. But they are trying to be so cautious in some arenas to not misstate something that they step on their own toes. They step on their own journalistic toes to protect themselves. Call it for what it is. Don't go overboard. Be factual. Then you've got true journalism. Facts. Remember our pledge. One nation under God.
You can follow Larry on Larry Connors USA Facebook. Larry Connors USA Facebook. This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.